Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George joins me now live from Capitol Hill. Okay, Joe, we're always running up against the clock here. Can Congress pass this in time? And is Johnson going to need to lean on Democrats to get this across the finish line?
Oh, no question. There's going to be some heavy leaning on Democrats. After all, remember, I think we're so focused on government in Washington come next year. Democrats control the Senate. Democrats control the White House. So there was always some leaning on Democrats as part of this process. But there'll be some leaning on Democratic members of the House of Representatives to clear some initial procedural hurdles as well here. Look, I think many of our viewers streaming along with us are familiar. It's almost Christmas. It's almost New Year's. Funding fights this time of year have become a bit of a commonplace in Washington the last decade or so. This is a very lengthy, though, bill. This isn't your typical keep the lights on and keep paychecks for federal workers going out piece of legislation. North of 1,500 pages, light reading, dare we say, on a Tuesday night in Washington. Much of Congress will be reading this legislation throughout this Wednesday. As you noted at the top there, the big top lines, March 14th, this is what it funds the government for. $100 billion for natural disaster relief. There's some expansions for telehealth included there. For NFL fans, maybe you're watching us right now. Maybe you watch a lot more sports than, let's say, you pay attention to funding fiscal fights in Washington. There's even a provision in this bill that allows local leaders in the District of Columbia access to land that could, and we stress the word could, be part of a potential bid to build a new NFL stadium for the Washington Commanders. So this piece of legislation has a little bit of everything. This is what we're hearing from conservatives, though, on Capitol Hill regarding this. They're wondering, did it really have to be this way? Couldn't a deal to keep the lights on and fund the government through March 14th, could it just have been passed simply as that, with maybe $100 billion for disaster aid attached to it? Why are there so many other provisions attached to it? Those are the questions that many conservative lawmakers are asking today. And there's one big question mark, and that is pay raises, Liz. This bill does give some provisions for members of Congress to receive a pay raise, Liz Landers.
Yeah, is that a popular measure? What would be the raise that lawmakers would receive here?
So anytime we're talking about politicians, elected officials getting a pay raise, I think people's ears perk up a little bit, right? Let's just walk you through the state of this fight. Members of Congress, your typical member of Congress makes $174,000 a year. Now, that's more money than the average American makes, but members of Congress haven't received a pay raise since 2009. There is an argument being made that you have to keep up with inflation eventually, or you're going to lose members of the House, members of the Senate, to private sector jobs. People have to look out for their families after all. But again, this is something that is tucked in this piece of legislation. Another example of something that I think will be a lightning rod for some members of Congress. In fact, some have already posted this morning they're not going to vote for this thing because they don't want to give themselves a pay raise while so many Americans are hurting. So we'll keep an eye on this 1,500-page piece of legislation. Our Capitol Hill team, led by Capitol Hill producer Sam Lisker, congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, will be tracking this all day. But the reality is this is a deal. And as far as timing goes here, when the holidays are approaching, Christmas, New Year's are approaching, lawmakers start smelling the jet fumes, if you will. It's amazing how quickly things can pass in Washington when lawmakers are up against a deadline and they want to get home to their families for the holidays.
Yeah, Joe, I definitely am familiar with the idea that these lawmakers want to get out of town sometimes. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George for us. Thank you, Joe.